In Haiti, gun violence continues to increase. The death after a shooting rampage on Saturday rose to 10. In China, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Ina Raimondo arrived to work on preserving trade relations amid geopolitical tensions. And in Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa was re-elected for a second and final 5-year term following another Trump vote. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Haiti, 10 protesters were killed amid gun violence in Saturday's shooting rampage. A march led by a Christian church in Canaan, a makeshift neighborhood on the outskirts of Port-au-Prince, was attacked by a gang that fired indiscriminately into the crowd. Protesters from the Église Piscine de Bethesda, some armed men with machetes and sticks, had gathered in an attempt to free the suburb from the influence of gangs. For the moment, government authorities, police, and religious associations in the Bouquets in the north of Port-au-Prince have not issued an official statement about this massacre. Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva participated in the 14th Conference for the Heads of States and Government from the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries, which is held in São Tomé and Príncipe. The Brazilian president traveled to the African country from Angola to attend the meeting. In a message published on his social media network, X, Lula da Silva described this meeting as an important moment of strengthening an exchange among member countries. The CPLP is an organization that brings together Portuguese-speaking countries and Equatorial Guinea, a nation where Portuguese has been one of the official languages since 2010, along with Spanish and French. Its goal is to deepen friendship and cooperation among its members in all fields. This is the last stop of its tour around countries of the continent before returning to Brazil. Colombia's Ministry of Finance approved the allocation of resources for the Youth in Peace social program. This is a plan with which the government of Gustavo Petro hopes to subsidize young people in vulnerable regions to steer them away from crime and delinquency. It is estimated the program will benefit some 100,000 people between the ages of 14 and 28, an investment of almost $300,000. The youngsters will receive a monthly stipend of at least $245, which will allow them to cover their basic needs and prevent them from being recruited to commit crime. Also in Colombia, the Ministry of Health alerted about an outbreak of dengue fever that has affected 274 municipalities in the country. The National Health Institute recorded that children under 14 years of age are the most affected by the virus. The health services indicated that although the cases are not serious, the alert is still in effect due to the increase in this month. Among the most affected localities are the district of Cali and the departments of Bolívar and Antioquia. The health agency warned that they estimate that the number of cases may increase due to the habit of self-medication practiced by the community and urged people to go to a healthcare center in case of symptoms. On the French island of Martinique, several clashes broke out between police and demonstrators in the city of Fort-de-France, resulting in the arrest of 2 people as well as the destruction of several vehicles and street furniture. Local media reported that the violence erupted when a group of activists attempted to demonstrate in front of the prefecture's headquarters. Police dispersed the protesters with tear gas, at which point clashes broke out between the two. The reason for the protest is unknown, but social media suggests that activists were demonstrating against violence on the Caribbean island and the policy of French authorities. In Bolivia, the historical and cultural contribution of the Afro-Colombian communities was celebrated during the National Afro-Bolivian meeting. The Minister of the Presidency, Maria Nela Prada, pointed out that the people should remain firm and united in the democratic and cultural revolution with the reconstruction of the economy and industrialization. She affirmed that unity is the cornerstone to consolidate the plurinational, dignified and sovereign state. At the same time, she announced the construction of a headquarters for the Afro-Bolivian National Council and delivered a vehicle so that they could easily commute around the region. In the U.S., an attorney filed a challenge against Donald Trump in federal court in Florida, arguing that the former president cannot run in next year's U.S. presidential election because of his likely involvement in the January 2021 Capitol riots. The plaintiff, identified as Lawrence Kaplan, alleged that a clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides that persons who have participated in an insurrection or rebellion against the government may not hold any office in the government. Kaplan also argued that the indictments filed by juries in Washington, D.C. and Georgia, which are investigating Trump's efforts to remain in power after losing the 2020 election, makes his disqualification from holding public office automatic.
Every right to do that. As you know, you have many people.
The 10th tropical depression became Tropical Storm Idalia in the Caribbean Sea as it moves between Mexico and Cuba. The Cuban Meteorological Institute's Forecast Center reported that the tropical storm has maximum sustained winds of 65 km per hour with higher gusts, and it is now slowly moving east at only 4 km per hour. The system's wide wind circulation will keep the rainfall areas very close to the national territory. Then strong and intense precipitations are highly likely to fall on Sunday, particularly over the western region. This institute remains alert and it is monitoring the development of the natural phenomenon. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo is on an official visit on China to work on preserving trade relations amid geopolitical tensions. During her 4-day trip, Raimondo will visit the cities of Beijing and Shanghai, where she will meet with senior Chinese officials to discuss various issues of common interest, including U.S. restrictions on technology exports to China. Raimondo's visit, the third by a senior U.S. official in the past 2 months, comes at a time of rising tensions, especially over technology transfer. On Sunday, U.S. military officials reported 3 U.S. Marines have died when an Osprey aircraft crashed on a remote tropical island during war games north of Australia's mainland. The aircraft was taking part in the Predator's Run drills involving thousands of soldiers from the U.S. and Australia, as well as Indonesia and the Philippines. The U.S. Marine Rotational Force in Darwin said there were a total of 23 personnel on board at the time of the crash, and Australia's military said only U.S. citizens were involved. 5 crew members have been flown to Royal Darwin Hospital in a serious condition. Rescue efforts were complicated by the location of the crash, the remote and sparsely populated Melville Island, about 60 kilometers north of the nearest city, Darwin. Northern Australia has become an important staging ground for the U.S. military in recent years, as Washington and Canberra work together to counter China's growing influence in the Asia-Pacific region. The Russian Investigative Committee confirmed on Sunday the death of the head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, in the plane crash that occurred this week in the Russian province of Tver. Following the completion of molecular genetic testing of those killed in the crash, the committee said in a statement that the identities of the 10 deceased correspond to the list presented in the flight log. Following the crash, the Russian Federal Air Transport Agency published the full list of people on board the plane. It included Yevgeny Prigozhin and Dmitry Utkin, one of the founders and commanders of the Wagner Group. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences to the families of those killed in the crash.
DNA examinations for the investigations of the plane crash in the Tver region have been completed. The identities of all 10 victims were established in the results, which correspond to the list stated.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for the inclusion of the African Union in the G20. The Prime Minister also proposed India as a solution to the problems of the global supply chain. Ahead of the upcoming G20 summit to be held in September in New Delhi, Prime Minister Modi called on the African Union to join the multinational organization that brings together 85% of the world's gross domestic product and 2/3 of the world's population, even though South Africa may be the only member from the African continent. Modi also stressed that India is the solution to create an efficient and reliable global supply chain in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government of India announced new regulations to cut the illegal export of non-basmati white rice, with restrictions on foreign sales starting on July 20th this year. Among the new actions, it was determined that contracts for basmati exports with a value of $1,200 per ton only and above must be registered for the issuance of a certificate of allocation. Those below that amount will be evaluated by a committee to be established by the Presidency of the Authority for the Development of Exports of Processed Agricultural and Food Products. The measure comes after the Ministry of Commerce of the Asian country informed that irregularities were detected, such as the misclassification of the cereal to disguise its export under the codes of parboiled and basmati rice. In France, a Republican Party will ask President Emmanuel Macron for a referendum on immigration. Eric Ciotti announced that next Wednesday, at the meeting of the head of state, he will present a proposal focused on suppressing the rights of illegal immigrants and benefits for parents who have not fulfilled their duties. Ciotti made the clarifications in response to President Emmanuel Macron, who in recent days said that immigration should be reduced and continue to act through schools, integration authority, the republic, and the economy. On Sunday, Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings opened its treated water dilution and discharge facility at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant to journalists. The plant, damaged by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, began discharging treated water into the Pacific on Thursday, despite protests at home and in neighboring countries that add political and diplomatic pressures to economic concerns. The release has been strongly opposed by fishing groups. China immediately banned seafood imports from Japan, raising concerns among fishing communities and related businesses. The Japanese government and the plant operator claim that the water must be released to make way for the decommissioning of the facility and to prevent accidental releases of insufficiently treated water. However, some officials argue that much of the water retained in the tanks still contains radioactive materials exceeding releasable levels. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. If you found a short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. In Zimbabwe, President Emerson Mnangagwa was re-elected for a second and final 5-year term. Mnangagwa's victory meant the ZANU-PF party retained the governmental leadership it has held for all 43 years of Zimbabwe's history since the nation was renamed following independence from white minority rule in 1980. According to Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission, 80-year-old Mnangagwa won 52.6% of the votes in the midweek election, while 45-year-old main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa got 44%. Ahead of Saturday's announcement of the 2023 results, dozens of armed police with water cannons guarded the National Results Center, which was the scene of deadly violence after the previous election 5 years ago, when soldiers killed 6 people during protests over delays in announcing presidential election results.
And it's good that there is a new confidence which is beginning to be instilled among Zimbabweans by what the president has been doing, and that is reflected in the increased voter margin which he had this time from the previous one, and it also is reflected in the lower vote margin which has gone to his main opposition, and we hail the main opposition advocate Nelson Chamisa for a good show. He didn't make it, but it was a good show. It shows that Zimbabweans are democratic. We also want to salute ZANU-PF, the party which won. It won absolute majority, which we need. We don't need anything other than absolute majority, because that's how you rule a country. Only on extraordinary things do you need a two-thirds majority.
Speaking from Harare on Sunday, Zimbabwe's main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa announced that he would contest the results. Chamisa said the elections fell far short of international guidelines and were plagued by unprecedented illegalities, irregularities, and encyclopedic opacity and forces of darkness.
There was therefore an illegality and criminality in the conduct of ZEC and all the polling officers and officials that were involved. The election process was fraught with unprecedented illegalities, irregularities, and encyclopedic opaqueness and forces of darkness, particularly FAS, which has become a spooky, ghosty, and shadowy organization that takes instructions from those spooky headquarters. The election process itself fell far short of the SADC guidelines on elections and international electoral guidelines.
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel concluded his tour of African countries with a visit to Namibia. During his trip, he held meetings with different counterparts in order to strengthen bilateral ties. Namibia was Díaz-Canel's last stop before returning to Cuba. During his visit to that nation, he held a meeting with his counterpart Hage Geingob, in which they discussed matters of common interest. The Cuban president participated as guest of honor in the celebration of the Heroes' Day, which commemorates the country's War of Independence. At the same ceremony, he received the Order of the Most Ancient Welwitschia Mirabilis in first degree, the highest decoration of the country. The Cuban president previously visited Mozambique, Angola, and South Africa, where he attended the summit of a group of emerging economies, BRICS, held from August 22nd to the 24th in the city of Johannesburg. In Gabon, authorities announced a nationwide curfew on Saturday and cut off internet access after the end of general voting. According to the nation's communications ministry, the curfew will be in effect from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. local time, while internet access will continue to be restricted indefinitely. The measure was announced after the inhabitants voted to elect new local leaders, national legislators, and the next president of Gabon. The ministry also explained that the announcement was a result of calls for violence and the dissemination of fake news on social medias. On Saturday, tens of thousands of people rallied in Niamey, Niger, in support of last month's coup, a day after the country's new military leaders gave the French ambassador to Niger 48 hours to leave the country. The Seni Kountché Stadium, the largest in Niger with a capacity of 30,000 seats, was two-thirds full, and vuvuzelas could be heard. Flags of Niger, Algeria, and Russia dotted the stands, while acrobats painted in Niger's national colors put on a show in the center of the field. Attendees say they fully supported the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland, which seized power after overthrowing the government of President Mohamed Bazoum on July 26. The CNSP is focused on not stopping the fighting until the day when there are no more French soldiers in Niger. In Iran, the army are advancing in the production of aerial weapons and preparing for the export of military defense products. The Commander-General of the Air Defense Force of the Iranian Army, Ali Reza Sabahifar, reported that the Islamic Republic has achieved significant development in the production of drones and defense equipment. The general also said that Tehran has designed a wide range of local equipment over the past few years to make the armed forces self-sufficient. Iranian officials have warned that the country would not hesitate to strengthen its military capabilities, which are intended exclusively for defense. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.